How you doing? This is Sean from Sean's Fish Tanks. I wanted to give you guys a quick topic that I wanted to talk to you guys about. I know at the beginning of this system, which has only been a little over a month, it was pretty much a all base rock type of situation. I was using all that shelf rock that I purchased, and with that video, basically it was just plain base rock. Now, ever since when I started the tank up, I put some pieces of live rock in at the bottom just to kind of seed the tank, to jump start it. I believe that was the best way to start this tank up. But the topic today is new tank syndrome and trying to keep things in line without killing stuff. And most reefers would right away shoot for low phosphates, low nitrates. I mean, we want to keep those numbers low, but we don't want to starve our tanks out in the beginning tank cycles and situations. We need to keep a certain level of nutrients in the tank, or otherwise you will not have success. You'll kill corals. So this is my topic today, and people can argue, but my philosophy with this has been to try to keep the tank kind of a dirtier tank, and in the first stages at least, and deal with algae after. I had several tanks that I would get some algae, and it never affected coral majorly. I never killed coral because of algae. And this is a shout out to other reefers who know about this, especially specifically right now, Rico's aquarium. He's got a 500-gallon system, and he's not worried about algae at all. And there's a science behind it. There's many ways of reefing, and there's many ways of being successful. And you know, no one's perfect. You may have some ups and downs, but in a young tank, I believe in keeping a certain level of algae. So my philosophy in doing so is to keep things stable, be able to feed heavy, and when you have the algae, it takes up the nutrients. I have a refugium in here, and yet you're still going to get marine algae buildup with phosphates elevated and nitrates elevated, but you need to have that in a new system in order to be able to keep coral. Otherwise, you'll starve them out. There won't be enough bacteria, and they'll just die. So you're going to have algae issues. So the reason why I'm doing this video is to just talk about that and how I do things. You have to ignore my daughter in the background. So what I do is I keep my nutrients slightly elevated. I treat for phosphate a little bit. Sometimes I'll treat with, and I do it very minimal, I'll treat with E-phosphate from Brightwell, or you know, some lanthanum chloride in some form or fashion, but I use a very little bit to keep my phosphates a little bit down, and they're still too high. But I leave that in there because I believe the corals need it. There's just not enough nutrient and biological processing going on in the tank when you have a young tank. So with this tank, right up close, if you could see the first coral at the very bottom, that actually is a red planet, mostly green. You can't see the red highlights, but there are some. But my lighting isn't ramped up real high at first. It's actually going on for a long length of time because this is all LED lighting. And I'm not going to get into lighting, but that's how I would work things, is have a longer length of time, because you don't have specific intensity and coverage that you would with T5 or halide, which is a little bit better for SPS growth. But I don't know if you can notice it, but in the first, right near that first coral, there's a lot of coralline explosion. There's that purple, if you can make it out, has all come across this whole front portion of the rocks. The second Burmese in the back has coralline too. So the coralline is spreading from the rocks that I seeded at the bottom really quick. I need to get a little bit more water flow up top, but there's an MP60 down there in the back, and that creates, it's spreading the biological, makes seeding the rock really fast. So maybe my young tank won't be so young, and very soon maybe it'll be a lesser time of beginning tank syndrome. But with this tank, my philosophy is this, and that is to keep one panel, and that's this panel that you're viewing from, clean. This is the only panel I'll clean daily. The other two panels and the back panel, I clean them at odd times. So let's say I'll start over here to the left on this panel, and I'll clean that panel tonight, let's say. And then get it completely clean of algae, and then I'll let that one build up for another 4 or 5, 6 days, and then I'll clean this panel. In 2 more days I'll go over to this panel over here on the right, and I do that specifically to get rid of algae buildup. Once it starts to get too big, then it can attach to things and start causing problems. If it's like hanging off and floating around the tank, you don't want it to build up too much, so you do have to clean it, but you let it build up to act as a filter. And it really helps with a young tank. It helps all the corals balance in, stay healthy, get the extra nutrients, but yet get the water cleaned and filtered through the algae process that your chaeto can't keep up with. There's no way at this point, with this tank being young, that my chaeto is going to keep up with the tank. It's not even growing. It's going to go through that new life, new tank syndrome, and every new tank will do that. You're going to have 4 or 5 months of more algae. That's just the way it is. And then all of a sudden, you're only going to have patches, and the tank's going to look pretty, and you're not going to have to worry about the film on the glass as much. This is with a UV on this system. So I have a Jabal 55 watt UV on here, and I'm still getting this algae buildup, but that's because I feed my fish, and I do high import, high export, meaning I feed heavy, not super heavy, but I feed so the fish are healthy and the corals are healthy, and then I export heavy. So I have a really large skimmer, I have a refugium, and I have a UV sterilizer. And I normally don't run it all the time, but I tend to because of the algae buildup. And then I also blow off the rocks every once in a while. You're gonna get a little algae coming around the corals. You're gonna have to blow it off, try to remove as much as you can. But if you keep up and you maintenance your tank properly, you're gonna be okay. I'm not a big filter cleaner. Like, I'm not gonna go to my wave makers and make them look beautiful and perfect all the time until the tank is balanced. Once the tank is balanced, then I'll clean things better. So in 6 months, this will not be the only viewing panel. I'll have others. But even then, I let algae build up. So I'll clean 1 panel a day, and then I'll go the next day and clean a different panel. It's a good process. It allows your water and your surroundings and the contact surfaces to deal with the nitrate and phosphate instead of having to treat the water so much. It's just a good way to process. And I still do water changes. I do about 8 gallons every other day. Sometimes I'll do 4, but I usually do 8 gallons in this tank, closer to 9 gallons every other day. So this tank gets a full water change. If you times 8 times 15, I mean, it's getting all the water. It's almost 150 gallons right there. So every month I'm changing all the water out, and that's a good process. It's a good way to make sure you're entering trace elements, you're keeping the levels where they should be. Corals just love water changes, so that's an important piece. You got to keep up with your water changes, and I just prefer to do small ones. It makes it nice and simple. I try to get up some of the detritus out of there. I've got a lot of flow, as you can tell, because this is only a 150 peninsula, but yet I have the MP60 in the back, and I have 2 pumps up at the top, actually 3, which are going to get changed out. I'm only going to have 2 because the pump I'm putting in here is a little bigger, but that's for another update. But I did want to give this talk, this chat, because new tank syndrome is a big deal, and a lot of people struggle with it. And I don't want to ramble too long, as other reefers would say, but I do think it's very important to let nutrients kind of build up and let the tank take care of itself in a new tank, because if you don't, you're just going to kill stuff. And I've had success doing this. I've been able to keep Acropora in a new young tank just by letting things take care of itself and doing certain maintenance steps. And other people can do it their way, but this is my way. And I just wanted to share my experiences with you, because I know there's people that really struggle with SPS, and I've had some luck. And a lot of it is just water changes. Doing your water changes, making sure you got a good water source that you're doing your water changes with, and keeping up that strategy. Flow is very important, and not having too much lighting. I don't have a par meter, but I would say right now my corals are probably all under about 250 par or less at this point, just because it is new tank syndrome. So algae is going to build up, but it's better to have that surfaces have that algae to take up the nutrients, because then the corals can still grow. And then, like I said, in a new tank, you need that. But anyways, I don't want to ramble too long. This is just a quick talk, and I'll try to do more of these on my process of keeping reefing the way I like to reef, and keeping my corals happy and my fish happy at the same time, and getting through the beginning stages. I hope you enjoyed it. Later.